2, 3, 4.
Sometimes we need to slow it down, take a look around and breathe. 'Cause these times go by so very fast, moments never last. Just breathe, breathe in, breathe out. Quiet, be still, don't shout. Love is what it's all about. Breathe. Sometimes when you feel you've had enough, living is just too tough. Just breathe. 'Cause you'll regret when these days are past. Your friend just seen your last. Just breathe. Breathe in, breathe out. Quiet, be still, don't shout. Love is what it's all about. Just breathe. Breathe in, breathe out. Love is what it's all about. Be quiet, be still, don't shout. Just breathe. Just love. Just love. Just love.
Good evening and welcome to the Just Love Show. This is Kip Baldwin. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Well, we went from having zero rain to it's been raining for pretty much 2 weeks straight. Not complaining. It's been really needed and very dramatic. Nice change from the endless sunshine that we were having. I know some of you out there going, you can shut up now. But anyway, like we do every show, before we get going, we're going to take a deep breath, think about all the things we have to be thankful for, and really breathe in all the wonderful things we have in our lives. Just take a moment to sit back, relax, and get ready for this wonderful show. I have a truly amazing guest on tonight, an old friend, and maybe one of the most talented musicians I've ever met and had the pleasure to work with and get to know. But before I introduce him, I'm going to do like I've been doing every week and start by reading something that I've been writing over the past 5 years as I meditate every morning about changing our foundation from fear to love. Usually try to find something that I feel fits my guest, and this is what came up for me today. The heart that is truly opened by love can never really be broken nor ever be again closed. The moment you have in your heart this extraordinary thing called love and feel the depth, the delight, the ecstasy of it, you will discover that for you the world is transformed. Jiddu Krishnamurti. And that's the writing for today. So anyway, to get into my guest tonight, my guest has had a tremendous career in the entertainment business. One story I want to share, I'm not sure if you remember it or not. My guest tonight is Alex Skolnick from the group Testament fame, along with doing all the string arrangements for the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. He also had a jazz trio called the Skull Trio, where he did jazz arrangements of really popular metal songs from Ozzy to Scorpions. Find it. It's the coolest thing you'll ever listen to. I got to know him. He had a band with another phenomenal musician named Michael Manring, who recorded at that time probably around 200 albums on Windham Hill, which is a jazz label. And they were doing, Alex's project then was called the Skull Patrol, and they were doing 70s cop show themes, which was, again, one of the coolest things you'd ever heard, just straight up funk pretty much. then Alex went back to Berkeley to get his music degree and do all of these other amazing projects that he's going to share with us. But one of my favorite stories about Alex, and I'm not even sure if he'll remember this, I was doing an art show for Linda Perry, who's written songs for Christina Aguilera. In fact, she had a show on VH1 this year. And we had flamenco dancers. We had giant pictures from one of Linda's ex-girlfriends, artists from all over San Francisco. And at one point in the evening, Alex and Linda got up and did the most amazing version of House of the Rising Sun. And I was just mesmerized by it. And this was before everyone had their cell phones out and were recording these things. And it's maybe the one performance in all of my years of being in the entertainment business that I wished I had had some sort of recording device, because I just can't tell you what an amazing rendition of this was, with Alex playing acoustic and Linda singing this song. It was just so phenomenal. And all I could think is, as the doors opened at 6 o'clock in the morning, the smoke billowed into the sun and people in suits walking by, I just saw all of this wonderful creativity disappear and float off into space. So while it was sad that I didn't have something to record it, I also started to look at it like Tibetan sand paintings, where you have this thing of great beauty, but everything in life is transitional and everything changes. And so while I wish I had that in some sort of recorded physical form, I get to cherish it in my memory, and maybe it's even better that way. So without further ado, or any more storytelling, I'm going to get to my very, very old dear friend, Alex Skolnick, who's one of the only people I've ever had on the show that knows a lot about where I came from before I got to the path that I'm on now. So welcome to the show, Mr. Alex Skolnick.
Thank you, Kip. Good to be here. And thank you for that warm welcome. That's really great.
Do you remember that performance with Linda?
Very well, yeah. And that's a good point. Yeah, it was pre-smartphone. It's one of those things. There would be numerous recordings of it if it happened today. And yeah, I wish I had that as well. That was a really cool night. You guys sounded so amazing, and I've heard Linda do that song other times, but it was never like that. You guys were just, it was meant to happen. It was very cool. Yeah,
so
that was amazing. And then a few years later, I kept seeing her name, and then it's like, oh, that great Pink song that's on the radio. She wrote that. Whoa, and oh, that's beautiful. The best Christina Aguilera song, I think. And then it's like, So I've obviously at the time I knew she was very capable, from Four Non Blondes, but she was it seemed like she was in this period of finding herself, because Four Non Blondes had recently disbanded, and she didn't have a new project yet, and she was still in the Bay Area, and it was within a year or two that I guess she was in LA, and then the whole thing with those singers happened.
Yeah, it was interesting the way I actually got to be friends with her. She had started Rockstar Records with Leslie Gerard, who was her executive at Interscope, and so she was trying to work with local groups like Stone Fox and some other bands, and she just got really tired of the Bay Area drama that a lot of the circles that she was involved with had sort of going on continuously. And she went to LA, and she was, from what I know about the story, she went to LA and she was playing around in Zeppelin cover bands. And you'd find her doing some really cool stuff with like Slash and things at different clubs and YouTube videos. And then it was really Pink that reached out to her. She was a huge fan of her work and wanted to, co-write the album with her. And the rest is sort of history. And then she did this television show this year, which was really kind of a making of the artist type show. And it was really cool. It was Linda being Linda, very hard, very exacting on the people that she was working with. And the one thing that was kind of sad, since you mentioned the Four Non-Blondes thing, was that she kept sort of referring to that as something, as almost a regret in her life. And I kept kind of thinking about it, but it was all like that next step in the path.
Oh, yeah.
And had that not happened for her, then there wouldn't have been there wouldn't have been an album that Pink would have known to say, hey, that's the person I want to write my album with.
Absolutely. Sometimes I go through the same thing as well. I obviously, Testament. I was out of. It's like there's this misconception that I've been in, the band Testament for like let's years, and I actually was out of the band for about half the time, and I've come back, and it's a new band. It's a completely, and obviously we'll get to that, but I'm able to do things now that were possible because that difficult period of those first few years of Testament.
Well, so to start off and start off with where you began as a musician and how this sort of unfolded to you up until we get to the Planetary Coalition, which is a phenomenal album. And I'm going to make you all wait because I've got to listen to the whole thing. But you're going to have to wait a little bit because you got to hear Alex's story. It's really a phenomenal journey.
Yeah, I just have to make a couple corrections.
Okay.
So my trio, it's actually still going.
Okay.
Called the Alex Skolnick Trio. Skol Trio is just the nickname. And we're sometimes called AST. But we're still going. We have 4 albums out. We're actually recording a live in the studio recording on this 2 days from now. And that's going to come out next year. And then for Trans-Siberian Orchestra, I did play guitar. I didn't do string arrangements, but I was the touring guitarist for a number of tours.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I don't know where I got the idea that you had done the string arrangements, but regardless, I got to see you in a couple of videos doing it, and it was really awesome to watch.
Yeah, it was a great thing to be a part of, but it was also... it was a thing I learned a lot from, which I'll get to. But I'm also at a point now where, I happen. If I were to be remembered for one, I would want it to be Planetary Coalition. So it's a great out there that and there will always be attempt. So okay. Hello? Hello, Kip?
Alex, are you still there?
I'm here, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I lost you for a second. I apologize.
Yeah. Okay,
so anyway, I didn't hear the last maybe 30 seconds of what you said, just a Skype issue. I apologize.
Oh, okay, that's okay. So basically, I'm proud of all, the work I've done. If I was to be remembered for one thing, I would want it to be this current album, Planetary Coalition.
Cool. Well,
so we start at the beginning?
Yeah, let's start at the beginning. You're originally from Berkeley, right?
Yes. Oh, that was the one other correction. When I went back to school to get my music degree, it was the New School in New York City.
Okay.
Also known as New School for Social Research.
Okay.
Some people think I went to Berkeley College of Music, but I didn't go to Berkeley College of Music. Berkeley College of Music is actually in Boston. But where I grew up is Berkeley, California, which is spelled differently. But for that reason, sometimes it's confusing.
Confused me because I thought you went to Berkeley too, so I got confused.
Yeah, that's okay.
As well.
No, it's a common thing. But I did grow up in because that Berkeley is EE, And then I grew up in Berkeley, Berkley, California. And I just, I had a very odd upbringing, in a way, which I've written about. I released a book last year as well, and the book is called Geek to Guitar Hero, and it's available through CreateSpace on Amazon. And there I tell the story in great detail. But I had a confusing upbringing because growing up in the 70s and 80s, it wasn't like today where information is at your fingertips with your devices. You have such a window into other places and other people. So it's not anybody of our generation. We grew up wherever we grew up. There's a tendency to think that the whole world is like that. It always feels as though your corner of the world is the whole world. And of course, as you get older, even pre-internet, getting older and meeting people from other places, and eventually traveling to other places, your perspective changes. But at the time, I was very confused because, for one thing, I was raised by East Coast ultra-educated academics that were older than most of my parents' friends. Most of my parents' friends were of the Woodstock generation, and they'd been hippies. My parents had been students in the 50s, so they were older when I was born, and they were just much more serious than other parents. So I had there was more of a sense of strictness, and there was no there definitely was no religion or spirituality, although we were culturally Jewish by heritage. But it almost felt as though I've heard of kids who grew up in ultra religious households and the difficulties surrounding that, and I've often related to it because I always felt like the religion was replaced by academia. So it was as though the University of California, where my parents were on faculty, that was like our church, and the whole world seemed to rotate around that. And the subjects that my parents are experts in, they both have PhDs from Yale. My mother in psychology, my father in law and sociology. These were not subjects that I was interested in, and being a child and having a lot of creative energy, I did not relate to my parents' world of faculty, cocktail parties, and National Public Radio at the time. It's ironic because now I love National Public Radio, but at that time I did not relate to it. PBS and these very serious public affairs programs like McNeil Lehrer and Washington Week in Review. So I grew up around these drab intellectuals, and when I discovered rock and roll and the guitar, it was like this world of color and this world of excitement, and most of all, expression. because I kind of felt like, the world that I was growing up in, my parents' world was, just very serious and drab and this idea of the old school intellectual. And meanwhile, I'm growing up in Berkeley, so my folks are in the ivory tower of Berkeley, but I'm growing up in the city of Berkeley, which never got over the fact that the '60s ended. So I'm going to school every day, walking through Telegraph Avenue and just seeing tie-dyed shirts everywhere and hazes of incense and pot and hearing all the '60s music. So I got drawn into the whole the music and the creative side of things. I think that's where it started, and I just liked the sound of music and I liked the guitar. And eventually I took lessons from a great folk teacher named Gary LePeau, and eventually the hotshot rock guitar players of the day. I would study with these guys, and they all had this mysterious guitar teacher named Joe. And eventually I wanted to study with Joe, and even though I was warned not to, because he's very serious, and I don't know if some people can't handle taking lessons from him or whatever. Anyway, Joe turned out to be Joe Satriani, who's one of the most respected guitarists of our time, and that studying with I in a very short time, I started playing guitar at 10 years old. Studied with Joe Satriani at 14 years old, joined Testament when I was 16 years old, and was making my first record at 18. So let's pause there, and you can ask me whatever you want.
Well, first of all, I didn't know. It's interesting because my parents were like the '60s kids, but the amazing similarities, like I grew up PBS, NPR. My dad was a news junkie. I grew up on a steady diet of World at War. My dad was a complete atheist and academic in his own way. But in that sense, it was funny to me that even though our parents were completely different generationally, I was growing up on pretty much the same diet of information that you were. And I know, and correct me if I'm mistaken about anything, but somehow you managed, despite growing up in Berkeley and you gravitating towards music, unlike a lot of people, how did you manage to stay away from the pitfalls of drugs and drinking? Because in the time that I've known you, that was never an issue for you.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. I never. It's not like I didn't get. It's not like I was clean. But for one thing, I could never keep up with anybody else. Right, so I was teased for being this lightweight. And then just the drugs, I never really got because I found them too debilitating. And it just might be my constitution. I'm still I'm a bit of a coffee connoisseur. But if I have, if I have coffee after like 6 o'clock at night, I'm not gonna be able to sleep before midnight if I'm lucky. Like I'm that affected by it. So the things like marijuana, it would really affect me, and I would get very paranoid. And I would try it often. I'd go through phases where I would do it, and then I wouldn't do it. And then with drinking, I was never able to keep up with the others. And I think as I got older, you know, I managed to, became a connoisseur in a way, where, you know, I can really appreciate a good scotch or a good wine or a good beer, but I never had that desire just to drink for the sake of drinking and the sake of getting trashed.
Well, the reason I ask is I know a couple people who have had, you know, basically, you know, being 14, 18, you're cutting your first album, you're going out in, you know, just a world awash in every sort of temptation known to man. It always fascinates me when people have managed to avoid those pitfalls, and what, you know, it was like one guy I know, really tremendous bass player, graduated from the conservatory in San Francisco, and he didn't drink or anything, do any drugs of any kind, because of a deal he'd made with his parents that as long as he wasn't doing anything, he could be out playing.
Right.
And then another friend of mine who has this huge music library and has built quite a career for himself doing music shows for different television shows. He grew up an athlete, playing baseball, which was his first love, and he just never had any desire to do it because he didn't want to damage his body. So it's interesting that, you know, the reasoning behind it, why you chose not or didn't have the inclination towards it, is different than the other people I've known that didn't somehow get drawn into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, there's different reasons. I just heard Chris Rock interviewed and talking about how he never got too into it, and part of it was, you know, just working in being a comic. He would work in bars, and he would see other comics that would just, you know, go take it too far with the drinks, and yeah, I could relate to that as well. I mean, even after the period with Testament, you know, I left in my early 20s, and when I started doing my own projects, you know, playing smaller nightclubs and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, I could see it. It could be really easy to just overdo it, and I never really got the whole, you know, getting trashed, and then just getting so it just didn't look fun. If you're not having, if it's debilitating and you're not having fun, there just doesn't seem to be a point. You know, and to me, you know, it's something I do, you know, only if it's, you know, if it's got to be good quality, you know,
right.
the product, you know, whatever you're consuming, and otherwise, you know, I'm not interested. I'm certainly not interested in doing it with reckless abandon either.
Right.
And so, you know, some of the same people that would try to get me to drink with them, and, you know, to talk about, you know, what a lightweight I was, and, you know, like how I couldn't hang all this stuff. You know, these are people that ended up, you know, completely, like, militantly sober. And you know, I've always been in a balance. It seems like, you know, many friends of mine have been one extreme or another. You know, I respect that, because that's just, you know, I guess everybody's experience is different.
Right.
Yeah, I've always just sort of been in the middle. I was never into being trashed. I was never into militant sobriety either.
Right.
But, you know, if I did anything, it was, you know, just very moderate, you know, a few drinks.
Right.
You know, because, and I, you know, look, I've also known, you know, many people that have lived to old age, like, seem very healthy even, that could still, you know, drink moderately, responsibly. But the drugs, that generally does not end up well.
Right.
So yeah, I from my personal experience, I've just found that's just something to be.
Well, I also have a sense that I think unless there's a genetic predisposition, I think sometimes people who are super like just fall in love with their instrument just for the sake of playing and the love of music, and it's not about the party, it's not about the girls necessarily. I mean, I know that's not the worst thing that comes along with a career in rock and roll. But definitely there, I mean, I know you've heard it probably many more times than I have of guys, and it sort of even at the level of music I was doing, it made me cringe sometimes when I'd hear guys saying, "Oh, I just got into it for the girls" or something. And I think that when musicians are really serious, I don't think that there is room sometimes for them in their playing to have that sort of a distraction and to be, as you said, debilitated in that way. And I can only imagine, some of the stories, I've heard about Eddie Van Halen, for instance, where, now he's not drinking, but where he was to the point where he couldn't play anymore. Right. And that's really, that's tremendously sad. And I know, a little bit from your story, your path was, much more similar to, say, the one Randy Rhoads' trajectory was headed on.
Yeah, and he was a big inspiration in a way, and he was somebody he had wanted to study further. I mean, he was passionate about classical guitar, which is something I deeply respect. It's a very different technique. But I got the bug for jazz guitar, and also world jazz or acoustic improvisation. But the same thing, that Randy had planned to do, which was, go back to school, get a music degree, and see where things went. That definitely guided my path, and was a big motivation to moving to the East Coast, where I had roots, and where I just suddenly felt very comfortable. Where I was just like, I belong here.
Well, but being so young when you first started in Testament, and then going down the road at 18, and then you said you left around the time you were 20. At what point did you have that look in the mirror and said, this I'm and I use this analogy for something I discovered about my own life, that when I came to the Bay Area, I was looking for the 60s 20 years too late, and instead I found little LA and the hair band scene here, which is exactly what I really didn't want to find. And it wasn't only until recently that I realized if you set your course even a degree or two off, even though you think you're sailing in the right direction, you end up in China instead of Hawaii. What was that moment, and you're fortunate that you saw it in yourself, that you saw, I'm not getting fulfilled from what I'm doing in Testament, even though I'm out having, a career that most people would kill or die for. This isn't my calling. When do you remember when that moment was when you said, I've got to go out and go back to school and follow this other thing that I feel in my heart?
I think there were many moments, actually. Look, I don't fault the guys either, because, if you talk to them about that period, they're very open. That was a really difficult period, and everybody was kind of being jerks to each other, and there was too much, too much partying going on, but not partying for the right reasons. Not to celebrate. It was like partying out of contempt and just boredom and unfulfillment, and I don't know. I guess I don't remember any single one moment, but I do remember several, and I just I think a lot of it had to do with what I was experiencing out of the band as well. I started going to concerts. I got a circle of friends, actually, that were all classical students that, very diverse listeners too. They loved coming to the metal shows. But we would go hear classical piano recitals, and I started going to hear great jazz artists. I mean, everybody from McCoy Tyner to Joe Pass, who's no longer with us, John McLaughlin. And then I remember there was a weekly show, it was a weekly jam session of all these sidemen. They were like professional studio and touring musicians in the Bay Area, and they would play once a week. And it was some amazing music. I mean, it hit me really hard. And these were guys that played with household names. Some of them, I remember there was a bass player that had worked with the great jazz saxophonist Wayne Shorter. There was a keyboardist who would actually record pop music, like all the big pop albums that were done in the Bay Area, that included Mariah Carey, Whitney Houston, and all that stuff. A lot of that was produced by Narada Michael Walden, who had been in John McLaughlin's band and sort of found new life in the '80s as a pop producer, but still a great improvisational drummer. And some of these musicians that I would go see, they were sort of like his right-hand guys. And girl, actually. There was Vicki Randall, who ended up on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. She was actually in that band before she got the Tonight Show gig. So it was all like that level of musician. And I just never been around musicians like this. I mean, Satriani obviously is a great professional musician, but just to see a band of musicians. So when I wasn't on tour, I started going to catch these gigs every week, and I would talk to these musicians, and they were all so nice, and they were just so like grateful that I was into their music. And then, meanwhile, I'm in this rock scene, and I'm not singling anybody out in particular, but the rock scene is full of guys that there's a lot of egos.
Too much testosterone and not enough thinking sometimes.
Yeah.
That was one thing that I really was discouraging for me, was the sort of, I guess, juvenile locker room nature of metal, at least in particular, where people would you'd go out to do your set, and you'd have your sound all set up, and people would go screw with your sound, and that was the one thing I remember when I first started to get to know you and Michael and Naomi and Les and everyone that was in the Skull Patrol, was, like you said, everyone was so nice. It was such a different experience for me to be around musicians like yourselves than the ones that I'd been around in the metal scene.
Well, Michael Manring, okay, that's a great example. I knew somebody, he actually, I was intimidated by his talent, because he was so great. I had played on his record, and I was humbled that, wow, he actually wants me to guest on his record. Oh my goodness. And then when I put that Skull Patrol together, I guess he'd heard about it, and gave me a call and just said, hey, if you're doing some gigs, let me know. I'd like to do it. Right? And and this is a guy. He's so talented.
This is a guy
so
just
humble. So it's like, you don't need to act like a diva. And meanwhile, I would know these guys that would just, did not amount to anything, that would act as though they were, they were on the cover of Rolling Stone.
Well, and to give you an example of, or to give you a description of what it was like for the audience to understand how good Michael really is, and like Alex is scary talented. You watch Alex play, and you're like, I'm not going to even attempt that. There's no way anyone should be that good. Michael was that good, and he made it seem entirely effortless. Like he would do a bass solo for Stevie Wonder, "Ribbon in the Sky," and he would play the rhythm and the melody line at the same time. And he would be looking around, checking out what's going on in the audience, and not breaking a sweat while doing it.
Yeah, it was really like freakish talent. But you know what? So yeah, so I was meeting people like that, like Michael, like these people who would play the club. The club was called the Kanzaki Lounge. It was in Japantown. The band leader's name was Frank Martin. Dickie Randall would do vocals and percussion. There was a great guitar player named Steph Burns. And, he was just, with respect to my former teacher, Joe Satchman, I saw Steph, in this little club, and I actually liked what he was doing better. I was just really getting turned on to quality music and just nice people. And, I think, that definitely had a big effect on me. And, I was just reminded that, like, a recent celebrity we're living in New York, you bump into celebrities a lot. And one of the nicest people I met recently was Sarah Silverman. And
love Sarah.
Was very small. Yeah, she's just so brilliant, and just like it was just like meeting a cool person. Like no airs, and we just actually could have a normal conversation. And when I posted about it, I said, we live in a world of NWAs. Nobody's with attitudes. And now here's somebody who's like a bona fide A-list celebrity.
Genius.
Who's completely down to earth. And what excuse do these other people have? But that's just part of it too. And I think as you get older and you get more experience, you learn to tell who's genuine and who's not. And I have met there are very talented people who aren't that nice. But generally, the really talented people seem to be really nice, and many of the ones who act like they're sort of A-list talent are not. And it's just very strange to me. And there's this game that many people are good at wearing these masks, and I think it's one of the most valuable things I learned, that you don't have to be like that. That's what they're good at, is just
wearing a mask.
Wearing and doing this act. And I think it took me a long time to just realize that just because I don't act like that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with me. There's actually something wrong with the. I was just so realistic that it was hard to believe that. Okay, most of the people around me are just complete actors. Like they're not professional actors. They're just acting. They're just these sort of, and something's wrong with me because I'm honest. I don't fabricate. I don't put on this front. And at a certain point, I just accepted. Okay, I'd read enough stuff. I've read, and I'd met enough, genuine people to realize, okay, it's a strange thing about, the modern society, the way, especially in, at least, in the U.S., in urban America, where this way of being exists, but especially in any form of entertainment. that's just part of it. It goes with the territory. And, yeah, I mean, and I've seen people actually come into it as, pretty, genuine seeming people and just get corrupted because they feel like they have to adapt to this. I've seen others just become, sort of disheartened and beaten down by it. And then there's others that, you learn to accept it. You just learn to accept this. This is the territory, and you don't have to let it drive you crazy, but you can be, you can be yourself. You can be true to yourself. You can create things that matter, hopefully, or that at least matter to you, that you feel good about, and not be driven by this, by all the pretending.
You've had such an amazing career and done so many different things. I would love to continue on talking about them, but I really want to get to the Planetary Coalition and how this came together and let people hear some of the music. One thing I do want to share before we talk about that real quickly is one experience I had, Sarah Silverman moment, when I was writing for BAM magazine, and also talks about somebody who, amazingly enough, has been entirely unaffected, was I got to know and interview Gwen Stefani when she was out on her first tour with No Doubt. And it's so heartening for me to see that she's still, despite all the fame and the glamour and everything, she still seems to be pretty much the same person. And just awesome. her love of even watching her be a coach on The Voice this season, I'm like, hey, that's still Gwen. It's still, this Orange County girl, and she's still super cool, and she's still super down, and she still super loves what she's doing and is a fan of the music itself. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us, how did the Planetary Coalition come together? What's it about? And tell us all about it.
Okay, well, just the brief history. While I was in Testament, I discovered not just jazz guitar, but just great acoustic guitar playing. Some favorites being Django Reinhardt, for example, and his later disciples, John McLaughlin, Al Di Meola, Paco de Lucia, the great flamenco player. So that style has always been there. And I think more and more over the years, I've been playing along to these albums. I've been, warming up to this music. I think at home, I play acoustic guitar so much that, it's really like this. It's been this hidden part of me. So on the most basic level, I've always wanted to do an acoustic guitar album. With this flavor of different regions, like a European flavor or a Latin flavor. So that was one seed that was brewing. I'd also imagined doing some sort of world collaboration. I've heard many great examples of international music. I don't mean like international pop dance remixes or these sort of these DJ electronica tracks where they sample a sitar and put it over a drum and bass loop. Not that there isn't some stuff like that can be fun to listen to, but no, I'm talking about like the real stuff. The real master improvisers. Somebody I saw recently who, to me, embodies that is Anushka Shankar, who's the daughter of Ravi Shankar and sister of Nora Jones, who's Nora Jones is actually a much more household name among Western pop listeners, but Anushka Shankar does this.
And for anyone who doesn't know who Ravi Shankar is, he played with the Beatles in the concert for Bangladesh. Is really how he first came to fame, if I'm not mistaken. And he's a sitar player. Is amazing.
And he taught George Harrison sitar, and that's why certain Beatles tunes like Within You, Without You, and many others ended up with having sitar. And later, it just he definitely changed the face of music. Well, because his daughter now is just taking things to a new level. So she's a great example of that. There are many others musicians I could name. But anyway, so I wanted to do sort of my statement like that. It's a little bit like being a curator. Some world music is, and I'm a big connoisseur of it, but there is some that requires a great attention span, and if you're not ready for it, you might not have the patience to dive right into it. So like for example, I have a piece on this album with a great musician from China, and Yihan Chen, and we do this wonderful variation on a famous Chinese piece that's called "Dance with the Yi People." Now, if you hear the original, it really takes a long time to build. The whole piece is like nearly 15 minutes long, and it takes like 7 minutes of build-up before it really kicks in. So I wanted to do something where somebody who isn't familiar with world music will get it right away. So I'm not going to say it. It's not pop at all. It's definitely the same quality of the authentic world music, but the structure might be a little more pop because it's the melodies and the arrangements are very relatable to people who listen to Western music. So so it was this combination of wanting to play acoustic guitar and record myself doing a great acoustic guitar statement, but also doing my collaborating and getting samples of my some of my favorite world instruments, and just showing musicians from very different places getting together and speaking this common language, and hence the title Planetary Coalition.
And question, you mentioned that Randy Rhoads was more focused on going down the path of classical guitar, but when I think of Lucia, I always think of classical guitar. What's the difference between some of the influences that you had, and I guess maybe I'm not understanding what the difference would be between classical guitar and the jazz guitar?
Okay, well, like a quintessential example of a classical guitarist, a great classical guitarist, would be Andres Segovia.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and if you purchase a Segovia album, there may be a piece from Bach. There may be a arrangement of Vivaldi. These are classical pieces.
Okay.
There might be some Spanish pieces. He was a great Spanish musician, and there are some great Spanish classical guitar pieces, notably Concerto de Aranjuez. But that's classical guitar, and Paco de Lucia is a flamenco guitar player.
Yes, I think I'd always thought of flamenco as classical. That's where my misunderstanding was.
Yeah, no. So flamenco is it's much more of street music in a way. Classical is sort of an extension of high art orchestrated music.
So the flamenco, probably most people would, and probably a large part of the audience might know, would be more like the Gypsy Kings type stuff.
Yeah, that's not actually flamenco, but that's a similar sound. Yeah, I mean it gets very interesting because the sound of the Gypsy Kings and others like Rodrigo y Gabriela, who are very well known, and they're actually guests on my album. Those players, they play with a pick. So they play guitars with a similar tone, but a flamenco guitar is actually different from a classical guitar, even though the sound is similar, and the way it's played is different. So pure classical guitar is played fingerstyle. Pure flamenco guitar is also played fingerstyle, but it's a very different sound, and it comes from gypsies.
Right.
It's a style of music from gypsies. Whereas classical, comes from this sort of this elite class in a way. It's a very fitting name that's called classical. And it was music appreciated by many, but it was also the upper classes would generally listen to classical, whereas flamenco represented more of the the common people's music, particularly in Spain, particularly with the gypsies. So Paco de Lucia, he's somebody that really developed flamenco guitar, and he made it I think by his time, it had become respectable, and he would play a lot of the same venues that, say, somebody like Segovia would play.
Right.
But initially, flamenco was this more street.
Hello?
A completely different, which has this whole other element to it. It has the African American element and blues and early march band music in New Orleans. And a traditional jazz guitar has it's almost like a it's almost like an acoustic guitar, but with F holes.
Mm-hmm.
So so they're very different sounds, and my style of acoustic playing on this is somewhere between sort of flamenco influenced acoustic guitar and jazz guitar.
Yeah, that's why I was asking, because when I listened to the album, I was hearing flamenco, and then when you start talking about classical, I'm like, I need to clarify that if nothing else, just for myself.
Yeah, sure.
So I know what I'm talking about. But believe it or not, my friend, we have blown through an hour. I could go with you another hour, but I want to make sure people get to hear your music, know where to find it. So tell us where we can find Planetary Coalition. Unfortunately, Alex had picked for the end of the show to play War from the Temptations, but we're going to have to push that aside because I want everyone to hear some of the Planetary Coalition, and Alex is going to tell us where we can find it at.
Yes. Okay, so you can find it at, if you go to planetarycoalition.com. This is probably the easiest way, because, there are a few links, but instead of describing the links, I'll just say go to planetarycoalition.com, or on Twitter at planetaryc. And there are links to Artist Share, and that's our record label, And it is also available on Amazon if you just do a search for Planetary Coalition. And iTunes, if you search on iTunes for Planetary Coalition, you will find it.
Fantastic. What song would you recommend us playing now?
Let's see. Is it the one that was queued up that we were discussing earlier?
I think we were talking about track 2. And
Yeah.
what's the title of that?
That's called Salto.
And what's the meaning behind the name?
Salto is a region in Argentina. And I'll just tell a quick story about this tune. These guys, I got an email from some musicians down there. They call themselves the Raza Trunca, and they play traditional Argentinian instruments. And they told me all about the village where they live. And interestingly, the same thing Neil Young has been speaking up about. This company Monsanto, that's this big biotech firm that controls a lot of the agriculture. They're an issue down there. So these guys had told me about their village, and they do a lot of protest music. And they taught me about this rhythm called a chacarera. So I wrote this tune, and they sent me a percussion track, and this is our collaboration. And it's a protest for the agricultural workers down in Argentina, and the region where they live is called Salto.
Well, I'm going to have you back on again because we really only got started, and I appreciate you being on the show tonight so much. And if you could stay around for a second after the song so we could wrap up, that'd be great. But right now we're going to play from Planetary Coalition, Salto, which is a protest song for Monsanto's.